sometimes you just reach the edges of auteur theory. My own personal take on auteur theory is that it's of limited use. You could say that it's one person is mostly responsible for the authorship of a singular movie. It's not the director is always the author. It's not the director is king. It's, it could be the producer. There could be a heavy mix. And then you watch the movies of Otto Preminger. Otto Preminger is a name you probably know. Let's be honest. He promoted himself. He promoted himself heavily. And you know what? I don't think he deserved it. Preminger was not a very good filmmaker. But wait, David. I've seen some Preminger movies. I've seen Laura. I've seen Anatomy of a Murder. I've seen Where the Sidewalk Ends. I've seen Advise and Consent. Those are good movies. How can you say that Otto Preminger isn't a very good filmmaker? He made some good movies. You know how I can say that? Because I don't think he brought anything to any of them. I don't think he brought anything that any no-name filmmaker from the studio era could have brought themselves. I don't think he brought literally anything. But David, he's known for his psychological realism. He's known for the heavy shadow work and noir visuals. Certainly that is some kind of stamp. And you know what? Most of his movies don't have any of that. Some of his movies, characters act incredibly stupidly. Most of his movies look nothing like a noir. The first video I made in this series was about Howard Hawks. That man had no visual style to him, and he had no real thematic connections. He used plot and character types over and over again, but ultimately all he had was a string of great movies. A lot of movies in a row that he just made very, very well. He's kind of like a Spielberg in that way. Spielberg doesn't have a whole lot of connective tissue across his entire filmography. You can pull out little sets here and there, but ultimately he's not a Bergman. He's not a Fellini. He's a guy who's just interested in making a bunch of different kinds of movies. And you know what? I kind of felt like that's what Preminger would be. But Preminger was just not very good at it. So Otto Preminger's career could be broken up into about 4 different eras. If I had a longer study to go through, I would actually go through those eras individually. But because this is kind of a shorter study, I think you can take those 4 and bring it down into 2. There's the early Fox era, there's the late Fox era, there's the early play-inspired independent era, and then there is the late novel-inspired independent era. Now, are the differences between the early Fox era and the late Fox era that great? Probably not. And what is the difference between the early play-inspired independent era and the later novel-inspired independent era? It's mostly where the source material is coming from. So in the course of this shorter study, we'll just break it down into the 2. Now, Otto Preminger was a German import. He came to America in the 1930s. He directed one film in Germany. It was essentially an experiment with his theater troupe, just to see if they could make a movie. It's called Dies große Liebe. I don't speak German. I think that's relatively close. And The Great Love. And it's fine. It's not good by any measure, but as like an experiment, hey, can I make a movie? It's fine. He managed to get himself a contract with Fox when he was in Hollywood, and he worked under Daryl Zanuck. And the relationship between Zanuck and Preminger is notoriously antagonistic. They hated each other. Now, why would Preminger keep working with Daryl Zanuck? Mostly because everyone hated him. Preminger has one of the worst reputations of a director you can probably name in the history of Hollywood. He was heavily antagonistic to almost everyone on set. A lot of directors develop very strong relationships with collaborators over time. They can be actors, cinematographers, writers, a bunch of people. Preminger never had that. The most you can say is Dana Andrews during the Fox period and Burgess Meredith in the Independent period. A couple of actors, and that's it. And the Fox period was probably dictated by the fact that, you know what, they were both Fox employees and had to go where they were assigned. I kind of get the sense that Burgess Meredith actually liked Otto Preminger. No one would do this for Otto Preminger unless they actually liked Otto Preminger. I feel like is definitive for Preminger is that Fox period. It's actually two. He made about 5 to 6 movies with his first contract with Fox, and then Zanuck let him go, didn't hire him again. Preminger stayed in Hollywood for a couple years looking for another contract. No one would give him one, so he moved back to New York for a few years where he directed theater. World War II broke out, and Daryl Zanuck went to Europe to help do film stuff for the U.S. Army. And that's when Preminger went back to Hollywood, went back to Fox, and got a lower executive to get him a new contract. Zanuck was not happy when he found out. And so this entire period is dictated by the early period being where, this is where in the studio system a director proves themselves. This is where they say, I'm giving crap assignments and I am going to make a movie. I'm just going to make the most of what I have. So you can see this in people like Hawks, Ford, anyone who worked in this period. They all had that. Almost no one went in and said, I'm going to make a magnum opus with the first one. William Wyler, one of the best directors in Hollywood ever, started out working for his cousin, Carl Laemmle, at Universal, making Western shorts. You can't even find them. It's like they're so obscure. And, he antagonized Zanuck all the time. He antagonized all of his actors. He antagonized his writers. No one wanted to work with him, and so he couldn't get his contract renewed, and he could only get a new one essentially by subterfuge. And so his second period is largely dictated by Zanuck trying to punish him. Preminger famously finished 2 of Ernst Lubitsch's films, A Royal Scandal and The Lady in Ermine. And you know what? Neither of them are very good because Preminger did not invest any effort in trying to improve them. He didn't want to replicate Lubitsch's production style. He just wanted to get through production as fast as possible. He wanted to prove to the studio that he could take an assignment and do it quickly and under budget and move on. If he is brought in to finish The Lady in Ermine after Lubitsch dies after 8 days and it ends up not being a very good movie, well, no one really expected it to be a good movie in that circumstance. He's coming in and he's doing the impossible. And then you actually see some other instances of this, like Forever Amber, which is kind of a nadir of his entire Fox period. They filmed for 30 days with another director. And they fired the director because the footage was terrible. And then they brought in Preminger to finish it. And he started from scratch. He started filming from scratch. He kept the script, he kept the cast, he kept the crew, he kept the sets, he kept the costumes. And he just filmed again. This time with, I guess, a base professionalism that the original director didn't have. And it's terrible. It's a genuinely bad film. Imagine Gone with the Wind, but set in, Puritan England. And boring and with no grander stakes. That's pretty much it. But it's in this period also that a lot of his best films are. This is where the noirs live. So Daisy Kenyon, Where the Sidewalk Lives, Laura. These are a lot of his best movies are here. And so you have this balance between, okay, he's got these awful movies that he's just thrown into. You got some a bunch of mediocre crap that I can't get into. But then you also have a lot of his bright spots. And so which of these movies is Preminger responsible for? Daisy Kenyon was one of my favorites of this era, and I figured, oh, finally, Preminger was making a movie that like was from him. You know, it's like this wasn't just an assignment, this was from him. He later said he had no memory of making it. I guess it wasn't that important to him. You know, it's like, what is this guy bringing? And what really connects something like Daisy Kenyon or Fallen Angel or Where the Sidewalk Ends or Laura, other than kind of a base genre element? What is the connective tissue? Now, I don't need there to be connective tissue if they're all just good movies. And you know, these movies I'm listing, I do like. I think they're good. But you combine the fact that Preminger also had a bunch of crap, and then his later period is full of just like mediocre nothing. And you're wondering, well, what did Preminger bring to these films? What was it about these films that he brought that no one else could have? What qualities did he bring? You know, base professionalism is not nothing. Not everyone can do that. Managing a set is difficult. You know, I've never done it, but I know that, you know, having meetings with a bunch of departments and, you know, holding the hands of actors and, you know, making sure that things are in focus and look good is not an easy task, especially when you have producers breathing down your neck. It's not easy, and he seems to manage the sets decently well. Is that all he brought? The ability to manage a set? His Fox period ends with River of No Return. It's one of his better ones of the era. I don't think it's quite good. It has some entertaining aspects, but it feels like a poor man's John Ford movie in kind of every respect. It doesn't look as good. The kind of world building isn't as good. The acting isn't as good. It's mostly Robert Mitchum just kind of playing himself and Marilyn Monroe kind of getting her way through scenes. But it's fine. But the entire experience was so miserable for Preminger that he bought his way out of his contract. He paid $150,000 to escape from his contract. And so we start with the independent era. And as I said before, this is largely dominated by plays. And the first thing he made is Carmen Jones. This is the adaptation of a Broadway production of an adaptation of the opera Carmen, but set in the American South with an all-black cast. And I kind of loved it. I was suddenly excited. I was like, oh, okay, so the machine kind of largely dictated where he was going when he was at Fox. But now with Carmen Jones, a movie I kind of love, I have my issues with it, but it's like I kind of love it. You know, I find it really entertaining, especially the central performance by Dorothy Dandridge, which is just fantastic. It's like, okay, so I have a direction now. There is a direction now. Something, he's going to input himself into it, even if it's just preference of material. It's going to be something. Then he follows it up with The Man with the Golden Arm, which is pretty good. It's based on a novel, not on a play, so the whole model kind of falls apart. But it's pretty good. It's not, you know, you hear about something like The Man with the Golden Arm. It stars Frank Sinatra. It's about heroin abuse, maybe morphine, probably heroin. And you know, it's like, oh, well, it's a character portrait. This is pure Preminger. And it may be, but ultimately, I just feel like, again, it's like, it's pretty good. It doesn't hit that hard emotionally. And it feels like a great filmmaker would have found what actually made it hit emotionally and go there. I mean, is Frank Sinatra's performance great because he's a great actor? Because Preminger, like, pushed him through a performance? Or is it just that Frank Sinatra was well cast and, you know, was just really good at playing strung out weaklings? Because that's like most of his best performances. You think From Here to Eternity and The Manchurian Candidate and The Man with the Golden Arm, it's like that's who he plays. And you know, casting is a great part of filmmaking. It's an extremely important part of filmmaking. You know, and director has a huge say in that. And then he hires Gene Seberg. A couple movies later, you know, I'm going to skip The Court-Martial of Billy Mitchell, which I outright dislike. I think it's a bad movie. But let's talk about Gene Seberg for a second. She starred in two of his films, Saint Joan and Bonjour Tristesse, and she's kind of awful in both of them. Now, I know that Jean-Luc Godard called Seberg the best actress in the world in the 50s. I think he was smoking something, because in St. Joan, she's genuinely awful. It's one of the worst central performances I've ever seen, and she's surrounded by great actors like John Gielgud, who are just acting her into the ground. She's all wrong for the role. I mean, this isn't just bad performance, it's bad casting. So yeah, casting Frank Sinatra as the strung-out weakling in The Man with the Golden Arm was great casting. Casting Seberg as Joan of Arc, who cannot bring about the combination of religious zeal and innocence and fervor that needs to go into Joan as she's written by Graham Greene, adapting from George Bernard Shaw. She can't do it. It's horrible casting. Was casting Frank Sinatra just dumb luck? Because it's pretty clear that Preminger really wanted Seberg, and she's awful. She's a little bit better in Bonjour Tristesse because, again, casting is just a little more appropriate. She plays kind of an airhead young woman. It's not, demanding too much of her acting talent, and she's fine in it. The movie itself is fine. And that ends up being kind of like the definitive form of Preminger going out. There are going to be some exceptions, but mostly it's just kind of fine. Things just kind of go wrong, they kind of go right, but there's almost no real, hey, what's gluing all of this together? Is it Preminger? It's hard to tell. So 1959 and 1960 is probably one of the most exemplar years of Preminger's entire career. He made 3 movies. He made Porgy and Bess, he made Anatomy of a Murder, and he made Exodus. It's 3 movies, one of which is 3.5 hours long, in 2 years. So that implies a massively efficient production. Pre-production, production, and post-production. And you know what? That sounds like a work pace for a studio era. He was fully independent. He was blowing through productions as fast as possible. Again, Porgy and Bess, adaptation of the Gershwin musical, done for Samuel Goldwyn. It's a very big production. It's got some major stars like Sidney Poitier and Sammy Davis Jr. And you know what? It's pretty good. You can't find it legally because the Goldwyn estate and the Gershwin estate both hate it and refuse to release it. But it's like, it's pretty good. And then you have Anatomy of a Murder, adaptation of a novel. This is kind of where the split happens between early play focus and later novel focus. Anatomy of a Murder is great. It's great. It's an outright great movie. Again, I don't know what Preminger brings to it. Is it the casting? It's like I love seeing George C. Scott in kind of anything, and he's fantastic in it. Jimmy Stewart is fantastic in it. Knowing Preminger's like inconsistent history with casting, was it just luck? And the script is really good. It's very focused on process and everything, and it's very focused and it works very well. But like the script for The Court Martial of Billy Mitchell is also very process focused, and it's terrible because characters are deeply underwritten and there's kind of no real drive to it, and it's based on rhetoric instead of drama, and it's really boring. But Anatomy of a Murder is great, and it's kind of in a similar vein as The Court Martial of Billy Mitchell. So where did he go right? Was it just luck that the script worked? I don't know. And then you have Exodus, based on a very large novel, and it's 3.5 hours long, and you know what, for the first 3 hours, I was mostly engaged. It was fine. It was kind of dull, overlong and everything. And then the final half hour is just so out of nowhere. It's like, where did this come from? I don't know where this came from. This is insane. So Preminger's just I don't know what he's bringing to these movies. When he's just bringing Porgy and Bess almost verbatim, it's like he's doing fine. When when he manages a great script and happens upon some great casting in Anatomy of a Murder, he's doing really, really well. When he is freaking just like adapting a book that's way too large for the screen, and he doesn't know how to direct Paul Newman or even Marie Saint. It's like, what's going on? It's like, why is this movie so dull? It's like, why is there no core found in this? And to continue that, you have to talk about The Cardinal. The Cardinal was probably the movie that I had the least experience with, but was the most interested in going in. An adaptation of a novel about a young priest who lives a big life and becomes a cardinal in the end. Spoilers. And it's not good. It should be good. I think it's a couple of decisions away from being good, but it's not. It falls short. And it's ultimately a script problem. It's like, Tom Tryon is fine in the central role. He's better in the first half than the second half. The second half is kind of where all the problems lie. It looks handsome. There's actually some fun filmmaking going on every so often. But ultimately, it's just kind of like, again, it feels like anyone could have made it. But then the script problems happen. So just a quick overview, the story of a young Bostonian priest who studies at the Vatican, goes back to Boston to be a parish priest, and like the first hour and a half or so is this relatively focused story of a young man who had studied religion through books, having to apply it practically in real world situations, and he has to face tragedy and difficult choices and all that fun stuff. And it's actually quite good. And then the last hour is two separate events. The first is the titular character having to go to the American Deep South to help a black priest, played by Ossie Davis, kind of rebuild his church after it's burned down, after Ossie Davis tried to have his black children in his church enrolled in the white Catholic school. And so, the cardinal, well, he's just a priest, has to face the bigotry of the American South and fight the good fight and apply the dogma of the Catholic Church in practical, life-affirming Catholic ways. And then we have a second big event where in the lead up to the Anschluss in Austria, the main character has to go to Austria to bring the cardinal in Austria into line with the Vatican. The cardinal in Austria is being very outspoken in support of Hitler, but the Catholic Church doesn't want that, so they have to try to bring him down. And it's this long event where it repeats thematically the exact same thing that happened in the Georgia South thing. And you get this sense that The Cardinal is a biopic. It was loosely based on the life of a real-life cardinal, and it kind of feels like it, where you're telling a huge life and you just want to get in all the big events. But it's based on a novel about a fictional priest. I mean, where is the vision to say, no, we don't need all of this. We just need to find the core of the story and just tell that. So if I had been in charge of writing it, I would have cut out the Georgia South part, because the Anschluss part actually has a minor character in it that is important in the first hour and a half, and just kind of it bridges the gap between them in a way that the Georgia South part doesn't. And he had about 10 more movies in him, and they're mostly adaptations of novels. Some of them are pretty good, things like Advising Consent and Bunny Lake is Missing, but most of them are just kind of, You think like Tell Me You Love Me, Junie Moon, or Such Good Friends, and you're left with, why do these movies exist? And it's hard to come up with anything, especially something like Hurry Sundown. Hurry Sundown, he secured rights for before it was published because this 1,000-page novel was being heralded pre-release as some sort of like new Gone with the Wind, grand gothic epic type thing. And he secured the financing, he secured the rights, and he went off and he made it, again, in record time. He might have taken 2 years to make it. Bunny Lake is Missing was released in 1965. Hurry Sundown was released in 1967. I mean, maybe he took 2 years to make it. I don't know. But it's like, it's such a broken screenplay. It's such a deeply broken screenplay. It is just a mass of subplots without a center. Again, who's directing this? Who is shepherding this script through pre-production? It's hard to say. I don't know. And his career just kind of steadily frittered away. Box office success continued to elude him until, the early 70s. He's relegated to, essentially not being able to work. His 1975 movie Rosebud is directing a screenplay by his own son. His own son has no other screenplay credits, by the way. His own son is still alive, and the screenplay is just not very good. And then he finishes with The Human Factor, an adaptation of a Graham Greene novel, and it's just, again, not engaging. I don't know why this movie exists. I just don't get it. And yes, the man made Anatomy for a Murder. Yes, the man made Laura. Yes, the man made Where the Sidewalk Ends. He also made Such Good Friends. He also made Forever Amber. He also made Skidoo. Skidoo is awful. I don't know, Skidoo is just, I don't hold Skidoo against him that much. It's the late 60s. Easy Riders come. Hollywood is desperate to try to latch on to the hippie generation. And so most people making movies at this time have some sort of embarrassing, let's try to appeal to hippies movie. And that was his. It's awful. It's deeply unfunny. It's like, how do you make Groucho Marx deeply unfunny? I don't know. But Preminger somehow managed it. I don't hold that against him too much. It's like... And so I didn't know what I was getting into with Preminger when I first started. I genuinely didn't. I thought he might end up having some sort of directorial stamp. I thought he might have some sort of consistent, quality across his films. It's so deeply uneven, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he kind of learned his chops in Fox, in the studio system. Combine that with his background in theater, where the writer is king, not the director. The writer is king in theater. And you have this recipe where Preminger is just going to trust other people to be professional and know what they're doing. And he's also going to have this inclination to just try to push through productions as fast as possible. So, okay, the script is fine. Okay, everyone on your marks, let's go. There's no time for, okay, this script doesn't work. We need to rethink it. Okay, this image is okay, but we can make it better if we do this. Okay, this performance is fine, but we can make it even better. Oh, this edit doesn't quite work. Let's find something else that can perhaps replace it. There's no time for that. Come on, we've got investor money that needs to be repaid as fast as possible. That's the world that Otto Preminger seemed to have lived in. And you know what? It's not fun. So yes, he did make some good movies. Is that all that's required for a good filmmaker, to make at least one good movie? Heck, I think he made 2 great movies. My 2 favorite of his are Anatomy of a Murder and Where the Sidewalk Ends. I think they're genuinely great. I love them. I think they are great films. But Where the Sidewalk Ends feels like the happy coincidence of the studio system working well, which it often did. And Anatomy of a Murder feels like luck. It feels like dumb luck. It feels like it was a couple of weird choices away from becoming another Cardinal, where it's like you can see the quality, but ultimately it just falls apart in the end. I'm just deeply frustrated by Preminger, just deeply frustrated, because he pushed himself out there. He did interviews. He put his name on almost every single poster, an Otto Preminger production, an Otto Preminger film. The posters are all great. They're all designed by Saul Bass, and they look great. Saul Bass did most of his titles. He did all of his posters. It was like Saul Bass knew how to sell a movie. And part of that was selling Otto Preminger as part of it. And that was Preminger's thing. He produced most of his movies. This isn't just a guy who was like caught in between a bunch of other producers. He was a producer. There is almost no one more powerful on a set than the producer-director. You know, this is the guy who's signing checks and telling you where to act. It's like, there's no one more powerful. Think Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood is his own producer-director, and he just makes what he wants. You know, and he's consistently good. Preminger, on the other hand, producer-director, and his filmography is deeply uneven, full of weird choices that sometimes just come together in individual moments, but most of the time, all you're left with is these weird combinations of choices that don't quite fit. Was Otto Preminger one of the great filmmakers? Oh God, no. Was he good? I don't think he was. I think he didn't care about the art side. I think he cared about pushing through production as fast as possible. I think that's all he really cared about. He probably should have been a television director, to be honest. You know, who is subservient to producers, to showrunners. It's like, all right, we need to film this 55 minutes of footage in 1963 to go on television in a couple weeks. You know, get through it. I think Preminger would have thrived there. Instead, he wanted to bring epic novels to the screen. It almost never worked. Most of them are just kind of miserable. Not necessarily terrible, but just kind of miserable. Just full of choices that don't make sense. You know, I started my YouTube channel focusing on filmmakers I actively really like. Wells, Lubitsch, Hawks, Ozu, Kurosawa. You know, it's like, these are filmmakers I love. These are filmmakers I want to spread the joy of. And here I am, spreading misery and frustration. I mean, seriously, I don't know what he wanted out of this career. I think he would have been happier making television or directing theater. I don't know why he wanted to be a filmmaker. I don't know what he brought to it. I don't know why he pushed his name out so much. Whatever, man. He made some good movies, but that's kind of it. I don't know why he wanted to make them.